Continuing on the topic of family communication processes, next let's talk about conversation and conformity orientations of families. The amount, breadth, and depth of conversation between family members is going to vary from family to family. Some families are going to encourage self-exploration and freedom, while others expect unity and control within the family. And we can break this down by looking at the conversation orientation and conformity orientation of the family. Conversation orientation is the degree to which a family encourages its members to interact and communicate or converse about various different topics. If a family has high conversation orientation, this means that the members within the family communicate with each other freely and frequently about their activities, thoughts, and feelings. A high conversation orientation leads to all family members, including the children, participating in the family decisions. And high conversation-oriented families tend to believe that communicating with children openly and frequently leads to a more rewarding family life and helps to educate and socialize the children. On the other hand, if a family is low in conversation orientation, the families don't interact with each other as often, and topics of conversation are much more restricted. In other words, some thoughts are considered to be private within these families and are simply not discussed. In addition, not everyone's input may be sought for decisions that affect everyone in the family. Open and frequent communication isn't deemed as important for family functioning or for a child's socialization in these low conversation-oriented families. A family also has a particular conformity orientation. The conformity orientation is determined by the degree to which a family communication climate encourages conformity and agreement of beliefs, attitudes, values, and behaviors. If a family is high in conformity orientation, this fosters a climate of uniformity. So the parents decide the guidelines for what to conform to, and children are expected to be obedient. Conflict in high conformity-oriented families is often avoided in order to protect family harmony, and there's a stress on the interdependence among family members. In other words, the family relationships often take precedent over those outside of the family in a high conformity-oriented family. If a family has a low conformity orientation, on the other hand, this family encourages a diversity of beliefs, attitudes, values, and behaviors, and an assertion of individuality. So we're looking for diversity here. The relationships outside of the family are often seen as important parts of growth and socialization, and it can teach lessons about building confidence for independence of the family members. In addition, members in a low conformity orientation family tend to also value personal time and space. Now, these two orientations, conversation orientation and conformity orientation, come together on a matrix to describe 4 general different types of families. As you can see on the screen here, we have low to high conversation orientation along the x-axis, moving from left to right, and we have low to high conformity orientation on the y-axis, going up and down. Let's take a look at each of these different types of families. We're going to start with the consensual family. A consensual family is high in both conversation and conformity orientations. You can see it in the top right-hand corner of the grid here. The consensual family encourages open communication, but also wants to maintain the hierarchy within the family that puts parents above the children. And there's often a tension between a desire for both openness and control within the consensual family. In this type of family, parents will often hear their children's opinions, but they will make the ultimate decision themselves and then explain why they made the decision that they did, right? High conformity, but high conversation. Let's take a hypothetical family as an example to describe each of these different types of families. So let's say that there's a family that has an adult child living at home. She's probably about 18 or 19 years old, and she wants to get a tattoo. In the consensual family, the child would express her reasoning for wanting the tattoo, and the parents would take it into consideration and ultimately make the decision. If the parents say no, she's not allowed to get the tattoo, right? So they had the conversation about it, but ultimately the parents are higher than the children and they make the final call. That is the consensual family. High conversation, high conformity. Next, let's talk about the pluralistic family. You'll see this one in the top left-hand corner because this is the family that is high in conversation orientation and low in conformity. So in the pluralistic family, there is an open discussion amongst family members, and these discussions are encouraged, high conversation. In addition, the parents do not strive to control their children's or each other's behaviors and decisions, low conformity. Within the pluralistic family, they value the life lessons that a family member can learn by spending time with non-family members or engaging in self-exploration. Let's go back to our hypothetical family. If in a pluralistic family, the child wants to get a tattoo, she would express her reasoning, there would be a conversation had about the tattoo, and the decision would either be made together or the child would just make the decision on her own, right? So they have a conversation about it, but ultimately the child gets to make the decision. That is the pluralistic family. High conversation, low conformity. The protective family, which you'll see on the bottom right-hand side of the matrix, is low in conversation orientation and high in conformity. In the protective family, the children are expected to be obedient to the parents, and they do not value open communication between family members. In the protective family, the parents make the ultimate decisions, and they may or may not feel the need to share their reasoning with the children. The protective family is very much the because I said so family. So in this case, the child would want to get a tattoo, but she wouldn't bring it up and or the discussions are going to be completely shut down, and the parents are just going to say no. So there's very little conversation, right? Low conversation, and high conformity. The parents are making the decision. That is the protective family. The final type of family is the laissez-faire family. This is the family that is low in conversation and conformity orientations. So you see it in the bottom left-hand corner here. The laissez-faire family have infrequent and or short interactions. They don't discuss many topics. This is thought of as the hands-off family. And in fact, the phrase laissez-faire is French for let it be. So in the laissez-faire family, parents don't really have an investment in their child's decision-making, and the members might even be seen as emotionally divorced from one another. So in this case, the child wants to get a tattoo. She doesn't bring it up. She just goes and gets one anyway. So low conversation, low conformity makes a laissez-faire family. And the interesting thing about these different types of families is that they might change and shift and grow as the family grows. Perhaps when the children are very young, the family is higher in conversation and higher in conformity. But as the children grow, the conformity might be decreased. So they might move from being a consensual family to being a more pluralistic one, or vice versa, right? But in addition to that, the type of family that you grow up in can have a significant impact on the generations to come as well. It might be expected that your family is always going to be one way, that if your family was always protective, that you are going to feel protective over your potential children and that sort of thing. Or it might be that you end up pushing back against the protective nature of your family and end up as a much more pluralistic family, so flip-flopping on this scale. But ultimately, we can look to the conversation orientation and the conformity orientation of a family in order to better understand the communication process of that particular family.